Hello everyone. So today we're going to learn how to combine videos together without re-encoding in ffmpeg. So the process is fairly straightforward. We're going to use the concatenate command to basically take a video like this and any other videos in the same folder here, and we're going to create a text file like this. And what we're going to do is just use this format, file, space, and then in quotes we put the names of the videos one after the other. So what I did is I'm going to make a copy of this and just name it 2, and then file, etc. like that. And we have a command here to make this easy for you. You would just change the extension to what you want, so .avi in this case, and play it in your command prompt, which you'd open in this folder. But you can also do it manually here, and you can change things manually like this, so pretty simple there. And then what we do is we use the concatenate command here, and pretty much as written here, and it's going to call up the text file and combine these videos together in the order listed here into a new output. So that's fairly simple sounding, but what we need to actually do is go through quite a bit of process here, because we can get sync issues when we're doing this. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go through this in a lot more detail, and we're going to cover the possible sync issues you can get and solutions to those, and little in between things, and what you can actually use this command to do if you're wondering what you can use it to do. So, without any more delay, let's jump right into things. So in Blender here, my VSE, what I did was I made this little video, and I'm just going to play it so you know what it is. Okay, so basically we have this audio track that repeats itself at the midway point here, and we have these color strips here, and the only thing to really note is that this here is just a duplicate pasted here, and that's pretty much it. I just changed the color strip colors, because what I did here for this one is I put a little cut in the audio strip here, and that doesn't really have any bearing on what we're going to be talking about today, but just if you're kind of an advanced user and if your player is a bit messy like mine is, Blender is, this is something just to see if there's going to be any kind of major distortion, or if that distortion might influence the concatenate command. And the answer is it doesn't seem to influence it at all. So not really something to worry about, unless your player makes it into an issue, which mine kind of does, but don't really worry about that. So it's pretty much just an audio track repeated. And we have color strips, but these are going to line up. So it's mainly the audio we're going to be looking at here. So this audio track repeated is all you need to know. So what we're going to do is we're going to render this out, and we're actually going to toss it back in. So I rendered it out here. And if I toss it back into Blender here, I have this up here. And we're just going to play them over top of each other just to make sure that Blender itself isn't causing any sync issues. Okay, so no sync issues. So what that tells us is that Blender is a fairly safe place to import things to see if they'll line up properly. So Blender itself isn't going to be the cause of any audio out of sync problems. So when we do the concatenate command, we can see if ffmpeg is responsible or not. So the reason I'm not using a DAW like Audacity is because Audacity is kind of a piece of crap when it comes to certain audio codecs like AAC, for example. See, this track here, I rendered this out from AAC to AAC, and when you have an AAC that you put back in, it does this weird change in the start time. So it actually causes a sync issue just by default, but these are actually lined up exactly. So if I toss them into Blender, or if I use them in a ffmpeg to make a video, they'd be lined up. But in Audacity, on the preview playback anyways, or the actual kind of playback that you use to modify things, they're out of sync. And this causes a lot of confusion, and it's hard to line these up to see if there's any actual sync issue that isn't just a display issue in this case. So that's why we're not using Audacity. But going back here, so I have my video here, and let's start the concatenate command. So what I'm going to do is we need a bunch of videos, so I'm just going to copy this, not delete, copy, paste, and we'll just rename it very briefly. I'll just give it a audio 2, that's fine. Then what we're going to do is we're going to create that text file. And so we're just going to open a command prompt, and I have one here already. And I'm just going to copy this and just paste it in. So all we need to change with this command, we don't need to call up ffmpeg. This is a standard command prompt Windows command. And we need to change the middle here based on what our extension is. We have .avi in this case. So I'm just going to change it to .avi. If you have multiple different file containers, you might be able to get away with a comma here. I'm not quite sure. But you can always just change them using calling up your input and just putting a -c copy and then specifying an output with the new container type. So that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Yep, so it is AVI, and it's going to generate a file called mylist. So I could change that if I wanted to. I'm just going to leave it mylist though. And so we see here, we just open that in Notepad or whatever text editor we want to open it in. And we have the format as follows here. So I can easily move that up if I want this to be the first one, or I can, if I make a change to the file name, I can just make the change here, just be sure to save it. And pretty simple. I can do this on my own. I don't need to use that command. It's a fairly simple formatting here. So next, it's as simple as just using our concatenate command. So again, I'm going to cheat and just copy that and just right click and paste. So let's look at this. So we have ffmpeg -f to call it the concatenate. Then I have safe 0, and this is something you just include based on whether your pathing is relative or absolute. And it doesn't hurt to include it, so you might as well just include it if you don't know the difference between relative and absolute files, like I don't seem to know. So we have our input, which is mylist.txt in this case. Great. Then I added in a map 0 here, and what this does is it calls up the streams. If we have multiple streams, like multiple audio streams, multiple video streams, multiple subtitle file streams, or stuff like that. So it'll just carry everything over. We don't need it in this case because we only have one audio and one video stream, and ffmpeg carries the best audio and video stream over automatically. So it's not a problem. And we're going to use ccopy here to avoid re-encoding. So the thing with this is, if as we'll see, if we have an issue with the sync of the audio, what we should do here is add just a V here. So that would just copy the video and it would re-encode the audio. And one thing to make note of here is if we are re-encoding the audio, we might want to specify for example, what the codec should be, because otherwise ffmpeg will assign a preset, and my keyboard is kind of not in the ideal location here, but it's just calling up CA. Instead of copying, we just specify the codec we want, so AC for example, and then just a space, and if we want to specify bitrate, we just do B and A for bitrate of the audio, and just enter a number. So the standard would be 126K for example. That we might want that as something higher, but we're not going to worry about that because we just want to copy everything over for this command. In copy. So we're going to copy the audio and video streams over. Then we just have an output file, so output.mkv is fine, but I actually want AVI in this case, just for consistency. And that's pretty much it. And it's telling us the timestamps might become undone because AVI is a crap container as well. And Blender is not helping things by creating pretty not great metadata for that container. So we have our output here, and let's just call up Blender and toss that in. So we know Blender itself isn't going to create any sync issues, but maybe our concatenate command created some sync issues. And if you remember, we combined this video with another copy of itself, so we just copy that over. So the thing we're going to look for is specifically this point here, if there's any sync issue, because we know the video is probably going to line up, and it does line up exactly, so don't worry about that. It's off by a few frames for some stupid reason, but that's not concatenate's fault, it's not ffmpeg's fault, that's Blender's fault. So the audio was okay with Blender after some mishaps, but the video is off because of Blender. So that's kind of concerning. So maybe be a bit concerned if you're using AVI as your container with Blender stuff. But yeah, let's move on from here. So let's look at the audio. Okay, so no sync issues there. Pretty okay. So that worked with a little mishap of Blender messing up, but concatenate worked fine. So I'll show you an example of concatenate not working fine. And to go back here, and I used MP4 here. Just look at this for example. And I guess you could argue that maybe it's our video editor, Blender, messing something up with the metadata of our container. But I have a lot of issue with MP4 on its own, and there's a lot of documentation online of MP4 having limitations and issues compared to other containers. So let's just play this. We'll duplicate it to cover the entire thing. Okay, that's pretty horrible. Yeah, so there's definitely a sync issue with the MP4 style of container anyways. So again, if you have an issue, that could be one of two things. It could be concatenate, so ffmpeg itself messing something up, or it could be the container type having some kind of weird thing going on there. So AV has a pretty old container. MP4 is a very popular container that people use for everything, but they use it for lossy type stuff. The issue could be the codecs, for example. So it could be the audio codecs, like something might be read improperly, like Audacity was reading the AAC. So I think what we learned here today is Audacity, can read audio codecs improperly. Blender can read video codecs improperly, and yeah. And we know that maybe there might be something wrong with ffmpeg as well, but we can't really confirm it. So other than that, let's talk about what you can do about that. So what you could try is to, when you're doing your concatenate command here, we could try a reencode instead. So with the concatenate command, we were always copying the audio and video streams. So what we could try instead is to just reencode them. This, creates artifacts though, which we maybe don't want. But the benefit of this, if you're familiar with codecs, the main one, H.264, is what we use here. But basically, a codec like H.264 will create these I, B, and P frames and other kind of variations of those. And the main thing is the I frame, and this is the only kind of complete images that are stored of the video. And it does this like every couple frames or so. And then the in-between frames are the P frames and B frames, and they just store the difference between the current frame data and the I frame a few frames back. So when you're combining things, sometimes weird things can happen and the I frames aren't referenced probably, and this is mainly seen when you're doing cut type commands. So I guess yeah, so the reason why you might use the concatenate is, say you maybe downloaded a bunch of videos online or bought a bunch of videos from a store, and you want to combine them into one mega movie video thing. So if you bought all 500 episodes of Naruto Shippuden, for example, and you want to combine those all together to create some mega super movie, I guess it's 20 minutes per episode, 500 episodes, that's 10,000 hours. A 10,000 hour movie. If you want to make a 10,000 hour movie, to use the concatenate command. So we use this to generate your file with all 500 videos. And again, you just apply the command here. And the issue you might run into is, well, you have all the openings and stuff. Maybe you want to get rid of those. And so what you would do is you would go in and you can use this command here. And this allows you to basically do cuts without re-encoding. And again, the reason not to re-encode is to prevent artifacts, and you can see what these are by just rendering something over and over again as the H.264 codec, for example, and specifically the color bits, so something like 8-bit over and over again, and you'll see weird pixelization. So if you want to avoid that, you can use a command like this. So what this does is the SS calls up the starting point. So say for 0, for example. So we have the hours, you have the minutes, and the seconds. I think if you put a decimal, you can type into milliseconds. I'm not positive on that. And you just have your input, so whatever my movie.mkv or mp4, whatever it is. And we use the to command, so saying go from 0 to a certain point. And the thing with the to command is, say for example, I have a 30-minute video, and I want to take the 10 to 15-minute point and make a new video of just that 5 minutes. Well, what you do is you type a 1 here, and then instead of typing 15 here, all you do is type 5, because you're telling it to go from the 10-minute point and then 5 minutes from the 10-minute point outwards. So it creates the 10 to 15-minute point clip that you want, but it's just a matter of notation, so just kind of keep that in mind. And the other thing to note is sometimes it's not, you might get an error having it outside the input like this, and sometimes it might be the way you want it to have, but you're getting something weird like a sync issue or something, you can try putting this after the input so it reads the input first, and vice versa. If you're having issue with it like this, you can try putting it outside. I don't pretend to know exactly all about all this stuff, but just something to try. And the other thing is, again, copy. So like I said before, this is how we avoid re-encoding. But the thing with the iframes is I can't actually cut on the in-between frames, so the p frames and b frames. I need to cut on the iframe. So what this command is going to do is it's going to seek out the nearest iframe to this point here, this time here. So it's probably very unlikely going to be right at 10 seconds. It'll be like at 10 seconds and a certain amount of milliseconds, or it might even be at 10 minutes and 11 seconds, 10 minutes and, okay, so 10 seconds versus 11 seconds type thing. So I got minutes and seconds mixed up there, right? It could be a second off from your time, so it could be 10:01, it could be 10:02, it could be 9:59, 9:58, something like that. But yeah, so that's because of the iframes, and you need to cut on the iframe, and you don't know where the iframe is necessarily, but you could find it with a probe. But the thing with that is it's very cumbersome to find it. So when using this command, the thing to keep in mind is it might not be exact on the time you need it to be. So if you're okay with having a bit of variation, you can set things up to kind of deal with that. So if you're okay with skipping maybe up to half a second after like the opening, if you're cutting like the opening out of a movie, if you're okay with skipping half a second of the part after the movie, it should be an okay command for you. But in terms of getting it like really, really exact, you will need to re-encode. But if you need to include everything, like be a stickler for including all the actual show footage, but you don't want the opening, you might go a bit farther back than the very start after the opening. So you'd get a little bit of the opening in there, but you'd retain all the data. It's just kind of trade-offs here and there. So it works great if you have like a black, fade to black right after the openings and stuff like that. So it's very easy to use, but it's just a case of finding where your times are and inputting them into here, then putting your command into the command prompt and executing it. And yeah, that's pretty much all I want to cover. So if you're having audio sync issues, you could try re-encoding by either just getting rid of this, but note if you just get rid of this, it's going to re-encode audio and video, and it's going to apply the presets of your output container. So if it was MKV, for example, it would change my audio codec to Vorbis, and it would change my video codec to H.264, which it is already, so it's not so much an issue, but it will re-encode both audio and video, and it will take a while to do that. Copying is a bit faster, a lot faster rather. So that's all I want to mention. So if that is kind of confusing, I apologize, but hopefully this will give you some insight on how to use this command. A good way to use this command is if I have, for example, what I'm doing right now, recording with OBS, and I have an opening I want to slap on the start of the video, or I can just have my start of the video as a separate kind of a video movie file, and just use concatenate to combine this with my FLV file that this generates, and just upload it. Look at the split. Very easy to do, and I'm probably not going to care if it's something's a little bit off in terms of the video, or if I'm cutting into something here and there. So I don't need to even worry about this. I can just do the commands as written here, and not worry about having the right container that can be a bit more accurate or whatever. I don't need to worry about that. But if you want precision, be sure to check after you do the command, just in a player or whatever you have that you know is pretty trustworthy. So I just proved that Blender is not so much trustworthy on certain things, which is unfortunate. Yeah, that's very annoying to me. But okay, that's all for this video. Thank you for watching, and hopefully that was useful. Bye. I'll put the commands in the description. Bye bye.